with DK Mishti.
We're
I see.
finally eating this time, maybe a little bit.
Right. So I was just on, I was on calls all morning, on video calls, and it was like 11:55, and I told Sarah, I was like, I got to go take a lunch break before lunch break because I wanted to try to eat something before before we sit down. And then I was thinking, actually, we have the perfect branding. We give ourselves like total excuse to eat on camera.
Yeah, exactly.
Feeling totally rude.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for designing branding that allows us to eat on camera.
Yeah, all of our shows will just have food themes. So
I mean, that's a huge category on YouTube, right? Is watching people eat.
Oh my God, that's true.
Today for lunch break, we're having dried mango.
Oh, nice. I got some banana bread and cashews.
Oh, wow. Banana bread and cashews.
Mm-hmm.
We have like this kind of feast or famine at our house, whether we remember to go grocery shopping or not.
What do you mean?
Well, if we forget to, we don't have any good habits around grocery shopping. So we're just like, things are getting really thin and we're like, grabbing for, I guess we could turn that into something, sort of at the end of our stock of food. And we're like, okay, let's go to the grocery store. And we go to the grocery store hungry and we just buy like everything on the shelf. Like, we walk out of there, with like huge, like 6 bags between the two of us or something.
Amazing. What was your last grocery store impulse buy?
The last impulse buy. I got vegan donuts. I don't know if do you know the Whole Foods has those like little donut. They're almost like a plastic tall box. I was kind of at checkout and I had played on, I think, actually, are you vegan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had played around trying out, I do a lot of like food eating experiments for periods of life.
Yeah.
And I had one segment for maybe it was a year or so ago where I did 6 or 9 months of like very strict vegan diet.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I do like 1 year I said like 0 processed sugar, like 0.
Wow. Did you actually stick to it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You did not make any exceptions?
No.
Oh my God. That's really impressive.
I do. Yeah. It's something like for me, it's easier to just like go and commit. Yeah. Anything part way, I find like extremely challenging. Like slippery slopes with like these are kind of just like personal challenges, curiosities, etc. But slippery slopes with these things are, just the end of them for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just have to be very like, okay, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do, and then stick to it, or just say, okay, we're done with that experiment. We're going to do something else. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so how was the processed sugar one? Did you feel different? Did you notice yourself being way more sensitive to sugar when you stopped? And like, how did you decide to stop?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was probably, I want to say like 15 years ago. And I used to train a lot, like doing like running, swimming, riding bikes. I used to invest a ton of time in that.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the way sugar kind of, you sort of like lose control of your ability to like the crashes and the highs and stuff. It felt really uncomfortable when you're sort of, I almost felt like part of training was also, training in the activities as well as training, your mind and your food and everything.
Yeah.
So it was kind of part of that. It was like part of that effort in a sense. It was all kind of consistent with that. It held it all together. I don't know. I'm not convinced that it like led to better performance. I think it led to better sleep. Like independent, it would have led to better sleep and often did. But also like I also had like a problem with overtraining. and that leads to worse sleep. So it's hard to fully, disentangle which of the training activities and sort of, too much or whatever, too much either volume or intensity would have decoupled or impacted the sugar situation.
Interesting. What were the best, like when you were eating dessert or was like a special occasion, what would you do? Like date stuff, did that count? Basically like any fruit sugar was fine?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I guess I didn't really explicitly clarify what it was. It was like no processed sugar and no processed foods. So yeah, like fruit would be okay. I mean, this wasn't like some prescribed diet. This was just something I made up.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, Max came.
Oh, Max. Hey, what's up, Max?
I was gonna tweet this out too.
He's not on video, or maybe he's mobile web.
Oh, Max, go on Chrome desktop if you want to come up.
That's fun. Yeah. So anyway, the thing I was saying, it wasn't like there was some prescribed diet that I was sticking to. I was just like make up my own set of rules of thing I want to do. And my set of rules was that like fruit would be fine, but here it is.
Oh, nice.
Is Max our first organic attendee to lunch break?
I think so. We're gonna have to tweet this out. I'm waiting for him to come up.
Nice.
It's a big moment.
Yeah. We should do it. We should take a highlight welcoming him.
Oh yeah, you can do that.
Oh, have a bite of my mango.
Sneaking bites of your mango.
In celebration.
Love it.
I think we should change the text that we share with the host at this point.
What do you mean? Oh, we'll act up by soon. Oh yeah, I think that's an issue about that.
Okay. Oops, Safari. Oh, was he Safari before he showed up with acting?
I think
I was able to invite him. So.
Oh really? Is it just still pending?
Oh, it just went out of pending state. I'm gonna try again.
Oh, hey, there he is.
Hey, Max.
Or now.
Our first organic guest to lunch break.
Oh wow! I heard you
talking
about diet earlier during lunch break, and I was kind of surprised. How's everybody doing?
Good. All right. Talking about DK's like crazy food experiments. Did you catch that?
I didn't know.
So DK did a year of no processed sugar.
Wow.
What have been your other ones? Vegan?
I did vegan for a bit. Right now I'm doing this experiment where I guess like it's sort of in the vein of how intermittent fasting works, but I don't have like a strict end time, but I don't eat anything except coffee, which is basically nothing. It's like water and, like a tiny bit of like coconut milk with the coffee, but I don't do that until noon. And I've been doing that now for probably a couple months, I want to say.
Wow. I got to watch what I say about diet because it's on the record here. So,
why are you a controversial diet figure? Do you have a 12-step program or?
I want to hear it.
Yeah, but I definitely
be one athlete.
Yeah, former.
What was your sport?
I played squash at Cornell, and for all 3 years. Great time. Wow. Also love cycling, of course.
Oh yeah.
Did that for a while, raced bikes back in the day.
Are you in San Francisco?
Sorry?
Are you in San Francisco?
I'm actually down in LA. So
okay.
Yeah,
let me say my brother-in-law is a huge cyclist and plays squash. I think he's actually with the Olympic Club for his squash playing ability. So.
Oh wow. What's his name, if I may ask?
Ed Yip.
Okay, I'll definitely look them up. That's a great combination, right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I tend not to like eat a lot before also like 11 o'clock. I find that my body is just like totally fine in the morning. I try to eat dinner at like 5 p.m. So I kind of contain my eating between like 11 and 5 in that block.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just stop. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's worked for me.
How long have you been doing that?
I want to say like a year now. Yeah.
Oh, and were there like dramatic changes when you started, and are you kind of in the groove with it now, or?
I would say I wasn't as disciplined as I could have been previously, but now that I live alone and I'm not with my parents or in college, I definitely feel a good routine and have stuck to that, and it's worked for sure. Yeah, but
do you feel like you recommend it to people? Like, is it something that you think works for? Like, is there some aspect of it that you think you'd recommend to other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think with diet, you have to be very careful because I think everyone, has different, body compositions and anatomy, right? So I don't think that there's one, bill that fits all in terms of dieting, but, it's worked for me, I'd say. But yeah, I'd recommend it to other people who are, fitness, like who are active fitness wise and who, have just good routines, I'd say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's a nice little intimate gathering we have here.
Yeah, totally. We've been following what we've been doing for these. It's like live Twitter commentary. So we scroll Twitter together and then like find something interesting and just jam on it. It's been really fun, actually.
Oh, there's a lot going on.
It's surprising how much we can get out of we'll start with one tweet and we'll just end up like talking for an hour about that tweet and where that leads us. Or sometimes we keep returning to it and getting a bunch of other ones. I had one. Do you know? Have you ever heard of Sami Inkinen?
No,
I have not. No.
So he created a company called Virta Health, which is kind of a insulin, diabetes, type 2 diabetes improvement company. But he is kind of famous. He's like a fantastic athlete, and he's famous. Let me look it up. He's famous for, I think he and his wife, who's also a fantastic athlete, did a row from, if I recall, it was from San Francisco to Honolulu, Hawaii, with no processed carbohydrates or sugar, no sports drinks, gels, or energy bars. Yeah. So here's here's a link to that. And Sami's like a world class, I think he competes in Ironman World Championships and stuff, and super legit athlete.
Wow, 45 days.
Yeah, this was kind of like, I think this kind of just before he started Virta, and Virta is obviously as a mission. This was like a kind of a no sugar campaign in a sense, but then Virta, the company itself, is kind of a mission of helping improve people's, insulin response, and it's like very sugar and no sugar focused.
Yeah, I've definitely tried to stay away from all processed sugars. Just not great for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting company is Levels. I mean, I didn't get a chance, Mishti, to do that Renko. Yeah. Gathering, but that seems like a really fascinating company. I don't know if you can talk more on that.
Yeah, I couldn't go to that either. I think it was the same time as the Lenny event, maybe, but
I think so.
Have you heard of it, DK?
Yeah, I'm familiar a bit with it. I've never used it, but I've heard, it's kind of the concept is continuous glucose monitoring. And so I think it's like a patch, almost like a Band-Aid with a tiny needle in it. You put it on your arm, you wear it all day, every day through the shower and everything. And I think you get a lot of metabolic and kind of health information that you can look at on your mobile phone.
Yeah.
I've heard lots of great things. I've heard, just like the wait list is off the charts, and tons of great feedback from people who've used it where they're able to get, interesting new information that I think helps people make different choices and hopefully better choices. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've followed Whoop for years now, and it's taken off like during COVID, and I've really excited about that. So,
Wait, I don't
Is that
know.
right?
What
Is
does it do?
Whoop? I didn't realize Whoop had a COVID moment.
yeah,
I've known of Whoop for years, but what did COVID help with?
I just think like I see Will post on Twitter a bunch now. It's like some Whoop user has it, and sees elevated like beats per minute or whatever it is, respiratory rate, and they decide to get a COVID test, and they realize that wow, I have COVID, and I wouldn't have known, until my Whoop told me. So I think that there's been a little bit of that catalyzed Whoop recently.
Actually, so Whoop is able to actually be a little predictive or give you early insight into a COVID kind of diagnosis.
Yeah, I think so, which is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know some concerns I've heard around some of these things. It's kind of tracking topics is I think some of it is easily leveled at the Apple Watch stuff, but I think it probably more generally applies. And it's today we sometimes are trying to take any information we can get and try to present it in interface. And so the starting point is not what problem are we solving or what kinds of behaviors do we want to shape. The starting point is like what can be provided in interface. And then we take that and then we try to make up stories about ways you could use that information or data to like fix something or change something. And I think one of what I'll call maybe like a canonical example of that is, I don't know if you guys are Apple Watch users, but Apple Watch has this feature. It has like three rings. One is called your move ring, one is called your exercise ring, and one is called your stand ring. And the stand ring, is you get a credit if you stand at least kind of like one time per hour, and you want to accumulate 12 stand moments across various hours, across 12 unique hours. And I think there's like some sense that like, yeah, if you're really sedentary and you're spending a lot of time in your chair, then if you stand more, that's helpful. So like, it's not like it's nonsense, but it's kind of like, why is this standing feature and why is it across 12 hours or, sort of how do we calibrate or decide that that's like uniquely good for health? Because I think the downside is if people have a bunch of data and then they feel like, well, hey, at least I stood 12 hours today, so maybe I'll have a chocolate bar in celebration. It's like,
It's like if the PMs on the Apple Watch team, have they consulted like with health like experts to design that like interface basically?
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you do surface information, you suggest that it's important.
Right.
That's true, actually. Yeah. That's why I never got any of those fitness devices because I thought I would just get too obsessed with them. Like I've never gotten a Fitbit or any of those watches.
Yeah, I agree. Same here. It's I remember my father was telling me that in cycling, people who got heart rate monitors, like people would just stare at them all day and try to like raise their heart rate so high that they actually having heart attacks. It's the opposite of what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was wild.
Yeah, exactly.
Your dad was a cyclist as well?
Yeah, so he actually still teaches spin before he goes off to his day job, teaching like 2 classes a day, and not with COVID, unfortunately, but did that previously. Yeah.
Wow, so it's kind of in your family. Is it a big family activity? Like you guys go on cycling trips together? Or?
Yeah, used to for sure. Not a lot recently, but my mom's also a great athlete, so try to do as many sports as possible.
Yeah.
Seems like you guys do that a lot, DK.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I've been a recreational hobbyist, but at different times in life, like more focused or less focused. And then I would say my wife Jen is even more focused recreational athlete, which is nice because it makes more opportunities for us to do these things we love. And so like if I'm not if I'm not doing it, she's like, hey, why aren't we going for a run today?
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, that's the status quo. That's good.
Yeah, it's like the normal is to be doing something.
Yeah, definitely. mean, I think with any of these things, it's just when people start construing health too narrowly, it just becomes a disaster after some point. Like if you only think about health in terms of your heart rate or only about your sleep or like how much sugar you're eating and just like go way too deep and get obsessive about any one of these pieces of the picture. I think like I have a really good friend who's like a super athlete and she's in med school right now. And she always says that there's a reason that people in other societies are a lot healthier overall, even though they might be eating the same thing. And it's because like partially because like they sit down to dinner with their families every night and like go on walks with their friends and all of these aspects of like mental and social health that I think fall through the cracks with this like obsessive fitness monitoring stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like the downside to a lot of the more you track and get deep on one metric at the expense of others.
Yeah, that's part of my thinking why I've never, gotten a wearable like for fitness or for nutrition or for any of that stuff. It's like, everything in moderation and then let it all play out and hopefully you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Michael Pollan quote, I think. What is it? Eat food, mostly plants, not too much. Pretty good. Like, if you follow it, you're pretty set.
Or all things in moderation, including this rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was funny. One of our family friends, like he had like a guidebook for his like kids. And I think he had like 5 rules. And like one of them was if like presented with a box of donuts, only have 2 at most, everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Did you have any, did your parents have any funny rules for you growing up?
No, my parents are pretty relaxed. I think if anything, it was just being honest. If there's something that, you make a mistake on, if you do something that you're not really proud of, just own up to it. And we'd be happier if you're, honest and upfront about it rather than, trying to hide it behind our backs.
Mm-hmm.
That was one. How about you guys?
What food strictness we're talking about growing up?
We were just talking about any funny rules that maybe your parents had growing up.
Not really. Well, I feel lucky because we cook so much at home that I feel like I've grown up with like delicious and healthy food my whole life. So I've never felt the need to or like been policed in terms of what I'm eating. But now that I'm also involved in like making it, you realize how much time it takes, just like how much thought it takes to buy the right groceries and assemble ingredients and cook. It's like a major chunk of every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that for sure.
Are you living alone right now?
Pardon?
Are you living alone right now?
No, I have a roommate, but it's the first time really that I've had to cook for myself, and it's I really have a lot to be grateful for in terms of my parents cooking every night and getting the groceries. As you said, it takes a lot of time, and really respect both my parents a lot more for doing that.
Yeah, totally. Did you have any, DK?
Funny rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, tons.
What were they?
Well, when I asked it started to strike me that there's probably so many that it'd be they'd probably each need their own category. But in terms of food related funny rules, well, my there's a strange habit, I guess, at my house. My dad had kind of like a pretty bad diet. Like I think he kind of grew up in the Midwest and kind of ate typically like what might be considered like typical meat and potatoes kind of diet. And then my mom somehow, I think through her family, I guess you'd call I think you'd call my mom and her family kind of more like, I don't know, hippie, crunchy types, right? So everything was whole grains and everything was, on no processed sugars and stuff. And so those two they're not really compatible. And so my mom used to cook one meal for my dad, and then she would cook the other meal for her and me and my 2 brothers. So
Wow.
we kind of grew up seeing this other food, and we're like, why can't we have that?
Oh my God, what would be an example of a divergent dinner plates?
Like we would, it was not atypical for like what was considered reasonable for a dinner would be like cottage cheese, pineapple, and wheat germ. That'd be like a dinner.
That was the healthy one?
That was the healthy one, yeah. And then maybe my dad has like, I don't know, like roast beef or something and mashed potatoes, right? But they would all come out together, two totally divergent things. And then he would be eating potato chips. And we're not allowed to have any.
Oh my God.
But I mean, I appreciate it now. I see what she was doing because I think she said, "Look, he's not going to change," but she said, "We can, build better habits." So I appreciate, her recognition about what this was and her choice to invest in us in that way, right? Like, I mean, it's hard enough to make one meal, but it's even harder to make two.
Yeah.
And the easy thing would have been, okay, she's not going to change him, so she makes what he wants and then just serves the same thing to everybody. But she actually took the time to, make the thing that he wants and then make a different thing that she wanted and that she wanted us to have.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway. Yeah. That she wanted you guys to change but wasn't trying to impose too much. Yeah, that's fantastic, actually. Yeah, I keep kosher, so I definitely have been in scenarios where, I've seen things that other people have that might look really tasty, and I think to myself, man, I wish I could have that, but I say no, thank you.
Are there certain scenarios where that it would be typical to come up? Like, what's the most kind of, I guess, I don't know, tempting thing or thing that where you see it and you're like, oh, I wish I were part of that.
I mean, I think about cheeseburgers a lot. Every time, with my friends, they get fast food. I'm like, oh, that looks fantastic. Meat and cheese together.
Right.
Definitely.
So you'll eat meat and cheese separately, but because of the kosher law, you won't combine them. Is that?
Yeah. So I actually, can't have meat and milk together. And if I'm eating meat, I usually wait 3 hours. I mean, I always wait 3 hours, not usually. If I eat dairy again. Some people wait 6 hours, depending on your level of religiosity. But yeah, it's what I do, and a bunch of other kosher restrictions as well. So no shrimp, no lobster, none of that stuff.
Are there really different, like the 3 hours versus 6 hours? Are those different kind of? Is it like a scale of strictness, or are there like different, like kind of? Is it rabbinical law that defines this?
Yeah, so it's rabbinical law, exactly. It's not, in text in terms of, how long you have to wait. So different people have different interpretations and follow different, rabbinical sources for, that time parameter. So definitely a little bit up in the air.
I see. So it's open to interpretation. And are there certain categories, like, would there be a name, like I think if you were to say like maybe Orthodox Judaism may choose 6 hours, is 3 hours kind of an adaptation, or is there a separate kind of term or grouping for people who might choose that maybe more liberal interpretation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think about this a lot, actually, not only with, being kosher and, the different, 6 or 3 hours. I think about it just generally. I think that the lines between being Orthodox or being conservative, I guess in between conservative and reform, have really like blurred over the years. So I wouldn't even categorize it by, if you're Orthodox or conservative, because those lines have just blurred tremendously. I wouldn't even know what to call myself. I mean, I kind of fit between Orthodox and conservative. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do people generally more, like historically, they would have more strongly identified with it, and these days things are just getting a little more blurred?
Yeah, I think so. Especially, I think technology actually has a large part to play, because there are a lot of questions now with technology that you wouldn't have had, when the rabbis came up with these interpretations. So, for example, if you're in an elevator, right, is traditionally not allowed. You're not allowed to use something on Saturday that is using electricity, right? So, but what happens if you have an elevator that stops at every floor, and that is set on a timer? How would you deal with that problem? And there's just so many of those, right? Like let's say Tesla decides to have a robo-taxi, right? If you decide to schedule your ride not on
Yeah,
I see.
could you jump in that car to go to your destination?
Because a car is using electricity, but is the intent that you don't actuate the electricity yourself? Then how far removed can you be from that?
Right. So that's the question. It all goes back to doing work on the Sabbath. But for example, if you have lights for your house, you can put it on a Sabbath timer that would go off, for example, on Friday night, let's say. And I guess everyone else has their different interpretations of that, but that's definitely one of the most common questions now is with timers, for sure. Yeah.
And is there a kind of a formal process or for how these get discussed or prosecuted or decided, or is there the concept of like a new interpretation that can be formalized, or what's the sort of, I guess, judicial process for that?
Yeah, there's not really one right now, and I think that's part of the problem. So you have all these technology questions and how they fit into previous interpretations, and that's something that always fascinated me. Is like I wish that there were a group of people who could sit down and say, "Hey, this is the direction we're going with all these new implications." Yeah. So who knows? Maybe I'll do that going forward.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry to bring us way off topic there from dieting.
No, that's actually really interesting, I think. Because, are there kind of judicial processes within subgroups? Or I'm just thinking about like tribes in general and like religious institutions, and some which are more or less formalized in terms of decision making than others.
Yeah, I think as you get, to like super religious people, there's definitely you have courts, for example, that are religious courts that would come down and make a ruling on this. I mean, obviously, I live in America. The government is, my court system, but there used to be in the past like a bunch of rabbis that would come together in, famous rabbis, like some in America even, that would come down with their rulings on certain issues. And there's still a little bit of that in terms of the Orthodox Union and other organizations, but yeah, that's how it's done in the past for sure.
But they're mostly making decisions and kind of within their audiences, they would propagate an idea and see if it kind of takes hold across other audiences.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's interesting because I see a lot of posts on Twitter, bringing this back to Twitter a little bit, with Rome cult and Rome mass.
Oh, yeah.
It's the most fascinating thing I've encountered, I'd say, in the last couple of months, is just how that community has been brought to life.
Right. Yeah. Are you a Rome user or Rome?
Are you part of the cult?
Cultist?
I wouldn't say I'm part of the cult, but I definitely use it. And it's funny. I think I talked about this before. I'm very light in terms of the amount of things that I'm subscribed to. I just think there's so many amazing products and everything out there, but you can really lose track of like what's going on if you subscribe to too much. But I subscribe to Rome. I pay, I think, $15 a month, and it's been fantastic. I really like it a lot.
How did you first come to know about Rome?
I think on Twitter. Yeah.
And what drew you to it?
I think what drew me to it was, I think, the interlocking links, right? The fact that if I tag something, I'm reading one article and I tag that to another. So, for example, like I actually copy and paste. If I'm reading an entire article, I'll copy and paste that into Rome and then make comments or tag things in that article that will tie into other articles or concepts or ideas that I have about that. And I found that really helpful.
So did you start it as kind of almost like a personal knowledge management thing? Because I've actually played with it a few times, and I haven't quite built any habit or something that sticks, but it feels like the core, first time user experience is around creating, stuff of today. It's almost like a daily to-do list. Is that the context from which you jump off to build this other knowledge graph, or is there such thing as like building a knowledge graph just like in absence of a daily kind of structure?
Yeah, so I actually don't. I don't use like the daily list that much. I'd say the majority of it is like a personal CRM. I think someone mentioned that before.
Yep.
And I've used Evernote before, and I know about their struggles that they encountered, as they tried to scale. And the thing that worries me most about Roam is what happens if that happens, right? Do I lose all my stuff? Because I found that it's been so valuable as a personal CRM.
Right. And do they offer some, is there some facility for how you might export it if there were problems?
Yeah. So I ask that question every day, and I'm like, today is going to be the day where I find out, and I just haven't dug into it yet.
Right. I would be, I think with a new service like Roam, certainly there's always risks, but I would be more optimistic for the future of Roam than maybe kind of what we've seen of Evernote, because I think the distribution, the primary distribution of Roam is actually very genuine, authentic, like there's no like advantages outside of the product and kind of the community around it. Whereas I think Evernote kind of grew particularly quickly through a lot of like early app store stuff. And, I think when you start growing because of App Store, you've got a lot of people coming in contact with the service. They were very high in the charge for a very long time. So you have a lot of people coming in contact with the service and don't always necessarily know what they're doing there, don't always have necessarily like all of the stuff together to understand how to interconnect or how to make it all play well with each other. So
that's a good.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I think Roam has like real, it only works because it actually works. There's no kind of external kind of limelight on it outside of just the, genuine, authentic usage and experience of it. So I know.
What about Boom? Is Boom going to fly someday?
Oh yeah. Is that the Boom shirt?
That's the Boom shirt. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I think I have.
Whoa.
There it is.
Boom.
Boom's gonna fly. So tell us about Boom. You guys know Ray, right?
Yeah, from Twitter.
Caffeinated Capital.
From Twitter.
I'm
sorry about that. I'm not good at Twitter.
Oh, I appreciate your Twitter.
I try to stay off of it.
Unfollow like the annoying VCs, but you're definitely not one of them.
Some people say that about me, which is the best compliment I can get.
Yeah. So tell us about Boom. So you've been involved in Boom since day one, right? Like there was nothing, right?
Pretty much since day one. Between Avichal and I, almost day one. Yeah.
So tell us what did that look like? Did you know Blake before from was it Kima Labs? I think was what he was doing before with Kima Labs and Groupon.
No, I never met him until he was at Y Combinator.
Oh, okay.
But I think Avichal and him went to the same high school, and they kind of knew each other from home, and then they both ended up out at Y Combinator one day.
Yeah.
Wait, what is Boom? Taking a step back?
Yeah. What is Boom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Boom is building next gen supersonic airplane.
Okay.
So
is this the catapult one?
What's that?
Is this the catapult?
No, but that's a really cool company too. No, this is literally like Concorde 2.0.
Got it.
Yeah. So supersonic air travel for consumers.
Neat.
And they're building the plane and then selling the plane to traditional carriers who want to operate a service like that, right?
Correct. So like United would buy some planes from Blake, hopefully one day, and hopefully they would buy a lot of them.
Yeah. And so I guess it's been how many years? It's been 5 years in or so, is it?
5 or 6 years probably, since he raised his first seed round. And so, he's went on to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and he literally built a third scale size Boom supersonic jet that will fly this year, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so once he flies that, he'll get FAA approval on it. And then he can basically raise more capital and start kind of literally doing what Tesla did in terms of building a manufacturing plant and then starting to manufacture bigger scale jets.
Right. And I know I've heard like the vision laid out early, and then I think, as you're building anything, there's always little, twists and turns and new things you learn along the way. So, are there anything specific that sounded like it was going to be, later or earlier, this kind of moved up or back in time, or any surprises that have kind of come up along the way?
I mean, I think the surprise is that it's a pleasant surprise. I'm like actually shocked that he actually built a plane, right? I mean, this was somebody with literally, they weren't quote unquote an expert in aerospace.
Yeah.
And he was literally building a social app. I think he sold his first company to Groupon. So, him wanting to actually build a supersonic jet, when nobody's really built a supersonic jet in the last like 25 years. So I think I was just pleasantly surprised that he actually pulled it off. And so his execution, even though, some things slipped here and there and maybe we lost like a year and a half of where we thought we would be, it's still crazy impressive, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. He built a supersonic jet. Nobody else, who else built a supersonic jet? Literally nobody in the world.
Yeah.
How did someone who was building kind of like social?
Well, maybe the military. Sorry.
But what was that like? What was the motivation behind that leap? How did a founder who had no experience in this space get inspired to kind of dig in, and like what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, Avich was a little bit closer to the founding story than I am, but I mean, Blake was just crazy passionate about flying planes. I mean, he had a pilot's license. He had no formal kind of like aerospace engineering kind of history, but he loved to fly planes. And kind of like everything most days, it's kind of like, the world's almost about making things faster, right? Whether you're like Stripe and you're making a checkout experience faster, or Affirm and you're improving credit and making that a fast experience. I mean, why shouldn't we move faster on jets? And so I think he just wanted to go fast.
Wow.
Yeah, we should get Avichal to tell the story at some point. The little bits and pieces I've heard were that I think they had gone to, was it elementary or high school together? So they kind of had known each other.
Yeah, high school, I think. Yeah.
And then after the Kima Labs to Groupon experience, and I think at Groupon, he kind of had a good enough experience and good outcome. And so I think he was kind of thinking like, well, what do I do next? Because I'm trying to I want to really do something impactful, and I feel like the last thing was okay, but not the big impact. So I think what I heard from Avichal, really the story was something around, he's just like, well, if you just have like infinite patience and you're going to just do whatever you actually most care about in the world, what would that be? And, I guess Blake had been playing with model planes and just, just like his passion. He never figured, when you don't have a win under your belt, it's hard to imagine how you're going to build a supersonic jet company. But because he'd had a bit of a win, he could like dream bigger. And so Avichal kind of helped him kind of, in a sense, gave him, a little bit of permission, right? In a sense, help him see that that's a possibility, and that he actually can just pursue the biggest, most impactful thing that he could imagine, even if it seems preposterous, right?
Yeah, and it is. He does have a very cool founding story too. I'll give you like a piece of it. He literally was like, "I'm going to build a supersonic jet," and he spent months building spreadsheets and kind of like a write up of why this was going to work this time around in a different way. And he took that write up to a professor at Stanford, and he said, "Here's all the work I did. I don't, to come back and tell me that I'm an idiot, that I shouldn't actually build this thing." And he left all of his work product with somebody at Stanford, a professor. And then he came back 2 weeks later, and the professor was like, "You should absolutely go and do this. This makes perfect sense. Go for it." And then that's when he basically like took the leap of faith.
Wow.
So he did a bunch of work on the front end and was like, he was just kind of iterating on his next thing. And he was like, "This could be huge, but it's not going to work. Let me do a bunch of work on it." And then he got validated, and now he's like truly validated with literally rolling out an airplane.
So was there, in that discussion, was there one specific breakthrough that had occurred since last time anybody tried something like this? Or was it kind of a confluence of events of like timing of like a few breakthroughs plus capital markets plus something else? Or what kind of was the enabler that caused this professor to say yes?
I don't have the details on that, but I mean, one of the simple things is like, the invention of like carbon fiber in terms of, now being used in aircrafts, right? And so, the Concorde didn't have carbon fiber, right? So it takes a lot of weight away, makes it more of an efficient vehicle to actually go for. So I think that was one of them. But I mean, he has when he started the company, he was actually not creating any new technologies, right? He was like, everything basically exists on a shelf. Let me just pull it off the shelf, modernize it, and then put it together. Yeah. And he's literally not developed any. It's not like he was like came up with a breakthrough of like, this new jet engine actually doesn't create a sonic boom. I mean, he's just working with the legacy kind of engine providers like Rolls-Royce and GE to modify those engines, for today's world.
So that's actually an interesting point that maybe has broader implications, because I think a lot of times in the startup ecosystem, people are looking for like almost like scientific breakthroughs in order to be able to do things, and sometimes a company should almost be looking for the scientific breakthroughs that have happened externally and then figuring out how to commercialize or incorporate them. So I wonder, just from your purview, you get to see a lot of companies at kind of the earliest stages. Do you feel like a lot of people are trying to like actually make a breakthrough, or trying to take a recent breakthrough that's occurred and the breakthrough is the commercialization or the kind of productization of commodity components?
I think it's all flavors within our portfolio. I'm just I'm thinking about the ones that I think most of the recent ones that have either IPO'd, right? Like take Open Door or Wish or Affirm, take a company like Airtable, right? Yep. Those aren't necessarily breakthroughs. It's just kind of repurposed for, repurposed for this generation, I guess. So there's nothing necessarily new in these kind of like outsized returns or these kind of like big, publicly traded companies now. So I think it's just a different way of doing things. There's not a lot of breakthroughs in kind of the recent cohort that's been just, hyper successful. But there's some stuff in the portfolio that, is going after that.
Yeah. Max is asking thoughts on Varda Industries. Is that related to the breakthroughs question?
Yeah, it definitely was. And aircraft,
There you go, right? There's never been a Foxconn for space, as Delian likes to put it. But I mean, look, Varda is off to a ripping good start, right? Like I'm currently fundraising for my next set of funds, and we talk a lot about how I pick founding teams, or how I kind of like gain a lot of conviction early on to be able to kind of double or triple down before anybody kind of knows about it. And I would say like Varda 30 days in kind of fits into that category of like, wow, how do I double down on this? I mean, I have no idea if they're actually going to be able to kind of launch a menu. I mean, I'm highly confident that they'll be able to get something into space. Who knows what happens after that? Nobody's ever done it. It's definitely a breakthrough. But the way that they've executed from a fundraising standpoint and a hiring standpoint in the first 30 days, it's like, it'll blow your mind. Like literally best in class.
Wow.
I mean, I think they raised a fairly large seed round, and then they literally pulled half a dozen people from SpaceX within within a week, and now everybody's in an office in a warehouse down in LA, and they're like already starting to work on this. So execution is impressive.
How do you think they were able to pull such impressive talent so early and so fast?
I mean, they had it pre-baked, right? So, and I think those are the best situations, right? I always tell my investors, like, I don't want to fund a company and then have to help them hire their first 7 engineers. Like the best ones are like, just give me the money and like go over there on the sideline until I call you in the game. And like, obviously, the founder had come from SpaceX, so they had, Will had come from SpaceX, so they had a unfair advantage of pulling a bunch of people over very quickly, and that was kind of pre-baked, and we kind of knew that going into the seed round too. So, anyways, but yeah, super impressed with the company, and they definitely have a fighting chance, just like Boom had a fighting chance, and it's going to be exciting to watch for sure.
Thanks for that. That was great. It's pretty hard to miss, I'd
say. Yeah, well, yeah, it's going to be fun to back this one. So I'm excited to be involved. I'm really happy.
I saw their pictures the other day. Did you guys see? I think Delian was tweeting out pictures of the space that they have, and then it was like totally empty warehouse, and then totally built out with all their desks and everything within, I think, maybe like a day's worth of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. After
and I'm pretty sure that was like Saturday and Sunday, right? Like they were just like no stop. They're just going for it. I love it.
Share the tweet. You can see. It's pretty cool. It's got the pictures of kind of go from scratch to empty warehouse looking thing to this. Yeah, in like a day.
I mean, it's kind of what we were talking about yesterday a little bit. Like DK and I were talking about all of these, basically about how important it is for people to find other smart, interesting people early on and like build those people networks for these sorts of ideas to even feel like they're possibilities, and for people to be able to pull in the right others to actually do something like this. And the whole, I feel like there's been a lot of buzz around, we were talking about this, like Ivy Leagues and YC and things like that being kind of the hubs of yesteryear, but now it's totally different. So I kind of wonder, the next people who are building like a Boom or a company like this, where will they be finding each other? Maybe it's slightly different for like highly technical fields where people are still going to like the same PhD programs or whatever, but
yeah, I mean, hopefully in this case, over the next like decade, there's a bunch of spin-outs from Boom Supersonic. There's a bunch of spin-outs from Varda. There's a bunch of spin-outs from companies like BioAge. All these kind of crazy, what look like on the front end like science projects, right? They create ecosystems. So, and then going back to Varda real quick. I mean, this isn't something that they just came up with like overnight. I mean, I think Delian has literally been like marinating on this idea for like 8 years. And then, he spent like 8 years trying to do what Blake did in terms of like, this is never going to work. How can I figure out how it's not going to work? And then realize that it's actually possible. And, over the years, he's built this kind of network. And he literally went out and handpicked some of these founders and some of these early employees at Varda. And then, this didn't come together overnight. I mean, this is something that he's been thinking about for almost a decade, I think.
My guess is also his role at Founders Fund. Obviously, Founders Fund is close to Elon and SpaceX, and probably they have some visibility into like other pieces of the space ecosystem that would need to be built out and are kind of important, but not, that don't have enough focus today compared to what they might need. Totally. What's the story with Founders Fund and SpaceX? So they were an early investor, I think, right?
I believe so. And I can't remember the name of one of the partners at the Founders Fund.
I think.
Luke ended up the Giga Fund.
Right.
Yeah, but he only, call it a fund, but he literally only had one investment, and that was like SpaceX.
Right, so, he was like a big SPV for SpaceX.
SpaceX, right? Totally.
And he's still doing that? Are they?
I think so. I'm sure
from people who say like, "Oh, you can go to this presentation if you want to buy some SpaceX stock."
Well, SpaceX stock is definitely the hottest thing. I think the two hot things that I always get pinged on right now are either Clubhouse. How do I buy into Clubhouse, or SpaceX? Mm-hmm. Chime's kind of spinning up too these days. So, interesting. Yeah.
Were you an early investor in Chime?
No.
Okay.
But my friend Poyo was. You know Poyo.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, cool. He was early in Chime.
He was early in Chime. Yeah.
Were they New York based?
Chime is here. I think in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
I think somewhere. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So getting back to the people networks, one thing I think a lot of people, are trying to figure out what's the angle on investing today. And I have been, whenever somebody asks a question like that, I often kind of suggest, well, it's going to play out a little bit different than it did before. So, 10 years from now, you want to look like Raymond Tonsing looks today, you have to look at what he was doing 10 years ago.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Right. Meaning like, you don't want to replay, like history never repeats, it rhymes, right? So you don't want to show up. If I recall correctly, the story was actually, why don't you tell us the story? What was I think you were doing real estate stuff and.
Yeah. So, basically I was actually, right out of college, I helped build these two companies that were like Web 1.0, like super boring businesses, but I quite liked them. They were like Yahoo for energy professionals. I know that's like really boring, right? Like aggregating data and information on the energy markets and then reselling that information. And we were building those companies literally during Web 1.0. And I wanted to come out here. I did that for 7 years after college.
It was like late 90s or?
Yeah, this was like it was like 99 to like 2005 or something like that. And then I was like, or 2006. And then I was like, okay, I want to be in San Francisco because that's where all the action is. Like that is the biggest tech hub of the US. I'm going to San Francisco to start a company. And so I left there. We never raised any venture money for these companies. We just bootstrapped them. And I left there and I came out here and I ended up buying some real estate in downtown San Francisco. And I thought I was going to try and start a company. And I was sitting in that office building and then the iPhone launched in 2007. And I literally I walked into a honeypot. It was like the iPhone launched and then literally off the street one day, Drew and Arash from Dropbox came into my office building and they were like, hey, we just got out here. This was 2008. We came from this place called Y Combinator and we need to sit in your office building and build Dropbox. And I was like, cool, come on in. So they came in and I took Drew out for a beer because I noticed that they were literally sleeping in my office building every single night. And I was like, I've never really actually seen anybody work this hard in my entire life. I'm kind of curious who these people are. So I ended up taking Drew out for a beer and he was like, you should just take your money and invest in my friends' companies and you should go meet this guy, Paul Graham. And so, I literally just got in my car and drove to Mountain View to a warehouse. It sounds super Silicon Valley. But he was literally in a warehouse in 2008. And he's like, I've got a couple of startups. You should just take your money and put money in our startups. And I was like, this is like a really cool ecosystem. This is like amazing. The vibe that was coming off that like 2008 YC feeling or environment. And so I just started investing and then that was that. And that was like, over a decade ago. That was like 12 years ago. And and then I never stopped and I never started another company. I just kept like giving people money.
And can we tell people the name of your first fund and the
it was called Orange Wall Capital in homage to the Orange Wall at YC. And then when I went to actually go, oh my God, I'm a technology investor. I need a fund. My founding LP, I was lucky enough to get Max Levchin and his wife Nelly to be my founding LPs just because I had become friends with Max. And then Nelly, his wife, ended up changing the name of my fund and naming my fund Caffeinated Capital. And I was like, cool, that sounds better than Orange Wall Capital. Thank you. And then that was that.
Yeah. I like it. It's got a nicer ring. It's a
yeah, totally. But that was the early days of Caffeinated.
Yeah,
and
I think early YC. This was like the era when my recollection of that era was when you would go to like a demo day. A lot of the skepticism, people would say, "Oh, that's a feature. That's not a product. That's not a company." So did you have? I mean, coming from having built some technology products, having done real estate, thinking about new things, did you have kind of similar concerns, or how did you sort of look through and figure out which features could become products, could become companies?
I didn't think about any of that. I literally was just investing in really interesting people that I thought were ambitious. And that was it, right? Now I have a little bit more of a holistic view on things, but that's a decade plus later. There, it was just, all the people in those like 8 or 10 teams of early YC companies, because the batches were like 8 or 10 or 12 or something like that. They were all just extremely of the best quality. I don't even know. I feel bad for not just indexing the entire batches, especially when they were 10 or 15. But I had no idea what I was doing. I had never made like a investment in my life. I mean, I probably didn't even trade any stocks, back then, because I was just kind of focused on working. But that was kind of my first. I met Howie Liu there. I have a funny story about Howie. So I'm pretty heavily invested in Airtable. I've been involved with Howie and Andrew's company for since inception. But I met Howie there when he started his company called eTax. This was like 10 years ago. And I was such a newbie. I was like, wow, Howie, you seemed like really amazing and special. Like, I just kind of want to partner with you for life. But I don't like the convertible note that you just gave me. So if you can change like this and that on this convertible note, then I'll invest in your company. And he was like, dude, I'm not changing anything and I'm closing tomorrow. Are you in or out? And I was like, I was such a newbie. I was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to give you money. I don't even know what these terms mean. They seem weird to me. So, I mean, that was how green I was. Lucky enough, Howie and I had a good bond, and we had a good laugh over it. And I was like, let me just do your next company, and I don't even, give me the same convertible note and I'll sign it. And I did. So,
nice. Yeah. I remember that little park across the street from Pete's Coffee in Menlo Park. I met with Howie there, and he told me about eTax on the benches there. And, nice. I didn't. I should have kept as close to him as you did, because I would have loved the best same skill.
No, he's great, but there's so many stories like that, right? But
and so if you were to back it up, is there? You sort of talk about, okay, maybe you don't care as much about the market. You want to figure out the person. Is it special, ambitious, etc.? Like, what are those signals, or what does it feel like? Are there anything that is the twinkle in the eye, or the way that somebody phrases something, or what? How would you describe some of that kind of special?
I mean, I think the best ones are always the ones, now this is a decade, right? Like I have some learnings over a decade. I mean, I think the best ones are somebody like, I'll give you like a perfect example of like Sami Inkinen, who started Verta Health. He had a competitive advantage because he already started Trulia. They sold that for like, $3.5 billion. But when he started Verta, he literally sat me down and he was like, here's the strategy for the next 8 years of Verta Health. And he was like, literally had 8 bullet points, 7 or 8 or something like that. And he's like, this is how I'm going to execute on this business. And here's about the timeline that it's going to take. And when you have a conversation like that with a founder of like, of Sami's kind of like at Sami's level, you're just like, you just push the chips in and you're like, okay, I wish I could find 15 or 25 more of these this year, but you can't. So usually you'll only get that a few times, at least in like a decade of doing this. You usually get that clarity of thought around the 10-year vision of a company a couple of times. At least I've only gotten it a couple of times. Sami was one of those. So those are just like easy yeses. You just like do those deals. Usually it's kind of like you get a deck and you're like, here's my starting point. I don't know. It seems like it could be super meaningful. I had I was looking back. I went for a walk with my friend Jamie Quint, who was head of growth at Reddit. And then recently he was head of growth at Notion, and now he left Notion. Previous to that, he started like 2 companies that I funded like 10 years ago that didn't work out. But he and I were kind of talking about Plaid, right? So then after our walk the other day, in 2013, I sent him an email about like something like, I don't know, but this seems like it could be extremely meaningful in the future, was like what I phrased it as. And I actually tried to invest, but by the time I got there, it was a little too late. But it's a lot of those things where you're like, a decade later, it's a 15 billion, $10 billion company, according to the new funding reports going around. But a lot of them look like that, where it's like, oh, this is really meaningful, and or this could be meaningful, but like I have no idea. There's not a lot of clarity of thought on the entire roadmap over like a 7 or 10 year period. So there's a lot of that too.
Right.
So, I mean, they come in all different flavors.
Yeah, on the Verta thing, you'll be happy to know this is the second time Verta has been discussed in the lunch break today.
Ooh,
the first time, if you look down the chat, you can see we shared the smackmedia.com story. No sugar, no problem. Meredith Loring and Sami Inkinen spill the secrets of their world record and marriage.
Oh,
we're talking about the no sugar Hawaii.
Was that a really old conversation, or was that new?
It was a conversation we had earlier, an hour ago. But we were talking.
But the link.
Oh no, the link is old. The link is old. Yeah, it's from 2014.
Yeah.
So we had been having a conversation around just kind of like eating habits and different kind of habits that people have been adopting and eating. And I shared this because I remembered it as kind of a cool story. And I think this was all precursor to Verta, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I mean, when he left Trulia, he started kind of like hacking on his own body and trying to like fully optimize for his triathlons that he was doing. And just, I think the initial way that he thought he was going to fix this problem for the world, right? Like literally like get rid of type 2 diabetes, was through a food product. So then he started iterating. He's like, I'm going to come up with I'm going to be the next Procter and Gamble and the next or Kellogg's or something, right? Like he was going to be a food company. He was going to try and solve this problem through being a CPG company, a modern CPG company with high quality foods. And then he just quickly realized that from a first principle standpoint, the better way to do this, the more impactful way to do this is through building this kind of technology platform. And then he kind of went all in on it. But it's a cool company. It's one of my favorites. I literally went all in on this company. So if it fails, I'm screwed. I'm out of business. I'm out of business too. And I like that. Those are my favorite things to do. It's like, if I'm good at it, I'll be good at it and I'll win big and everybody will be happy. And if I'm not good at it, I'll be out of business and I'll find something else to do.
Yeah, I've always told people kind of who are early in the career that I think you want to try to find an opportunity where you have enough rope to hang yourself. You're on the hook. And this was actually kind of came up yesterday a little bit with with Kevin Huang at DoorDash. He's like, I want to have a number. What's my number? I want to be responsible for delivering on this result. And I think it's actually it's sometimes. It can be obviously scary in a sense. It's like you're taking a risk. Your neck is on the line for accomplishing something. But I think it's also, a place where you can more clearly know what you're trying to achieve, more clearly measure yourself against your goals. And, certainly, in the extreme example, obviously Ray's not going to go out of business, but
yeah.
But that's kind of an extreme example of sort of being responsible for the number, right?
Yeah. It's kind of a little bit back to the boom conversation. It's like you only get one life, you might as well swing big. So go for it.
Yeah. So on the topics of kind of the people networks and what's next, I think like in the case of when you meet Sami, you push all the chips in, it's the right call. That's kind of a in a sense, you can get conviction on that and make that bet. I wonder, some of the other places that, but there's only so many of those per decade. So,
sure,
you'll do them when you find them, but then you also are going to look around kind of a broader ecosystem. So are there changes in ecosystems today around sort of, the next Sami? You want to find the Sami from 15 years before. Like, how are you going to meet the next Howie Liu, let's say, right? Howie you met through eText, through Y Combinator. Certainly Y Combinator has a lot of talent aggregated, but there's also a lot of new kind of differentiated communities and differentiated like service offerings and kind of alumni networks and all kinds of different places where talent like the Howie Liu of eText, what was it, 10, 12 years ago. So what are those? Are there specific places that you like to look, or do you have any kind of favorites of places where you're spending a lot of time? Or I
mean, at the moment, I'm spending all my time with institutional investors trying to get their money so I can give it to really cool founders. So I've taken my foot off the gas a little bit on the deal flow side. But I mean, I think the thing that's top of mind to me, and I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody. It's like, I think Harsh tweeted this out yesterday from an article that he read. And it was kind of like, 50% of the deals might be in Silicon Valley, but the other 50% are going to be in the cloud. So it's kind of like, as an old guy, it's like, how am I going to harness, how am I going to be in the cloud and find the deals in the cloud, right? I think that's like something that I think about all the time for the last like six months. And I don't have a good answer to that yet. So, but I do think more things are going to happen in the cloud. More deals are going to happen in the cloud. I think Sahil from Gumroad is probably going to be really good at accessing some of these deals better than I will, just given his his activity online. I'm it's tough for me to stay up till 9:30 to watch Avicho on Clubhouse, right? So, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out.
Right. Yeah, it seems like there's both like new tools and networks for publishing that can create kind of hubs of audience, and then there's some of these like private Slack groups or other private communities where people, I don't know, kind of what type of deal flow might come through a place like On Deck or through the stuff that Avichal's now doing with South Park Commons, and it feels like there's a bunch of flavors of that kind of thing that are getting established, each with hundreds or thousands of kind of engaged, active, but often kind of curated for a certain flavor where the deal flow might be recognizable, or you sort of might be able to develop spidey sense around that. So I wonder if one way is sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could probably like build a pretty awesome portfolio if you just checked in on Product Hunt every day, right? Like that would be like the easy one, where it's like, you don't have to kind of be in a private chat room in Discord or some of the other kind of like chat rooms that are happening. Right. And you could literally just sit on top of Product Hunt, and maybe once a month you're picking one company that you just want to invest in. That'd be a great place to start.
So here's one for you. I don't know if this is interesting, but I've heard it mentioned that is it Suhail's Shipping Friday Discord is kind of the
totally. Yeah.
On that one?
I should jump. I mean, I'm invested in Mighty.
Oh, cool.
I think that he's like next level founder. I'm so bullish on what he's building, and like him as a person, and him being able to kind of create his dent in the universe. Like there's no doubt that like his impact is going to be, enormous going forward. So, but I haven't jumped into that, but I obviously follow him fairly closely on Twitter, and I should jump into the Discord. Yeah,
I've heard it rumored that it has a lot of that kind of early, almost like this pattern seems to exist over time, which is things start early and raw, and they're highly under optimized, and there's kind of opportunity everywhere, and then they kind of become like structured and institutionalized, and then a lot of the opportunity gets competed out, and they can still exist, but they're they are what they are. And
I mean, it's like AngelList back in the day, right? I mean, it was a spreadsheet, it was an email from Naval,
right? And presumably, I don't know if I get the details of this right, but I think Shervin learned about Uber through AngelList back in the day.
Through that email, probably, yeah.
Wow.
So, but it's almost like every new community probably, if it has a strong kind of hub or reason for being, would end up attracting things that are less, like it would itself be less structured, and it would be less competed, and it would attract things that are maybe less fully formed. And so it might be that, like Uber looked a little weird at the time it was going through AngelList. Yeah. But almost like that's the opportunity always looks a little weird, right? At least for the.
Yes. Well, I didn't see that one. I didn't see that one when it went through AngelList for some reason, because I definitely looked through my Gmail way back in the day. But that's one that actually wouldn't have looked weird to me. I'm highly confident that if I saw Uber, I would have done that deal, because you could never get a cab in San Francisco, right? Like you know that, DK. Like literally trying to get a cab to go meet my future wife for dinner or something. I was always late, and I literally ended up like running blocks and blocks and blocks to try and find a cab in San Francisco. So if I would have saw that one, I would have been like, yes, I'm all in. take all of my money, and then the rest would have been history. But I'm still working. So.
My miss on that is worse. My miss on that is much worse. So I was excited about that concept of. I had a friend actually who had been talking about. He'd been calling it Taxi Hub. He's like, I want to do taxihub.com. All the taxis come through this website and kind of get dispatched properly. And so I was spending a bunch of time, and I met, actually, Aiden Senket introduced me to a guy who was running black cars in kind of the peninsula for kind of all the, kind of tech execs there. And I met him at, I don't know, some like, cheesy dinner place mid-peninsula, and we talked about how tough this business would be because he was just like grizzled old. And then I remember Ariel Poler and I had the chance to meet the guy who was working on Cabulous, and we sort of spent some time with that. And then I was talking to Ashwin Kumar, who started the original was Blippy with Philip Kaplan and them. And he was like, you should talk to TK about this because like he's excited about this space too. And we used to go over to Travis's place. He used to hold these things called the Jam Pad, where he would just kind of get everybody around the table and sort of just jam on ideas together. And I went over there one time and was chatting with him about it. And I was like, I think this is like a thing. Like this should be a thing. And at the time it was like pre-launch and pretty experimental. And he was like, it's a thing, but we'll see. It's San Francisco only, taxis only. And he sort of, I think, was, he certainly wasn't trying to sell the idea as being big. He was kind of a little more muted on it, let's say.
Yeah.
But I should have just right there. That's my miss. I should have right there been like take my money.
Yeah.
I'd done the legwork and I just had so much conviction on this, but but I didn't make that move. And then if you want the second one in the same category, I had been telling Keith about this, about my excitement about this. And so when he met the Zimride guys, he introduced me to Zimride guys. We hung out on Palo Alto, in Palo Alto on California Avenue. We talked about it, and they were doing kind of like almost like enterprise software to help Facebook manage a rideshare program. Like it was a little bit like of a different thing. But anyway, we kept in touch and stayed friends. And then we were working actually with Avichal in that space with Dan in the Optimizely team.
That's where I met you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so they kicked us out as they were growing, and the Zimride guys were right down the street. So we ended up leaving the Optimizely basement and moving to the second floor of the Zimride space. And then
you still didn't invest. It was right under your nose.
Still didn't. It was right under my nose. Just totally didn't.
Yeah.
But
I've got my fair share of misses. I wonder if there's any really awesome startups right now today on California Ave. I remember that being such a 10 years ago, that was like a honeypot. I literally met. This is one of my misses, right? Like I met Ben from Pinterest down there. Yep. He was down there. The Zimride guys were down there.
Yeah.
I want to. No, I think Bill from WePay wasn't necessarily down there, but there was like one or two other companies that I met down there that ended up working out really great. Yeah. I wonder if there's any kind of ecosystem, spinning up on Cal Ave again right now.
Yeah, I would guess that was a moment in time. I would guess that's kind of like, I think like the internet is that thing now. Like I think that thing is Shipping Friday, or it's some other place on the internet. That thing that was Cal Ave.
Yeah.
But what do you think got you? What was like the pivotal kind of network connection or experience that you had that like got you into those rooms in the first place? Do you know what I mean? And like, what will that be for people getting into Shipping Friday or getting into On Deck or whatever we're saying these like aggregated places are? I don't think it's as simple as like Ivy League, Google alone anymore.
Yeah. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what that little interaction is going to be online where you're like, you're in Shipping Friday and all of a sudden you have some kind of interaction with somebody and then like your brain goes off and you're like, I have to like hang out with this person. Yeah. So then you set up like a Zoom call or you hang out in our friend Elad Gil's Orbit, his new product that he shipped yesterday.
Pluto.video.
Oh, Pluto, sorry. Yeah, I couldn't remember. Like he was coming up with a name. And I think Orbit was one of his names, but
it was.
ended up going with Pluto. Anyways, yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of funny, right? Like, I can think back 8 or 9 years ago, even as early as 5 years ago. Literally, all I had to do to find an awesome new early stage startup to invest in was literally go to, like, 8th and Brannan and then start walking. And I would see DK and he'd be having a coffee somewhere, and then he'd be like, "Oh, do you know this guy?" I like having a coffee with some random, and then I'd meet this guy, and that guy would be like, "Oh, you should meet my friend. He's starting a company." So literally, right. I could just, like, if I spent 4 hours in Soma, I'd probably have 6 new startup ideas to, like, chase down. Right. Yeah. And now I can't do that, right? Like, you don't want to go to Soma. Right. Yeah. There's no deals to be had. They all move to, like, Shipping Friday, right? So right. I don't know what that's going to be, what that interaction or that kind of nudge to really kind of just reach out and start, like, your brain goes off and you get excited about things. So, but I'm all over it as soon as I get this money raised.
Yeah. There's a question on here. The thoughts on Humane. Yep. Do you know that one?
What do they do? Tell me.
2 ex-Apple rock stars have raised $30 million to build an iPhone.
Oh, yeah. Funny enough, those 2 founders used to office literally like 30 feet away from me. So they were in here for in this office space for like 3 years, kind of iterating on this. They were super secretive about it. They seemed like super great people, but they never talked about it. And then, 5 years into them planning this, they launched this, and I don't know. I have no opinion on it because I haven't checked it out. But our friend Pollo, he invested famously. I'm pretty sure
Elemental, right?
Yeah, he invested hundreds of millions of dollars into iPhone competitor, and that didn't work out too well. So I don't know. It's definitely something that I don't want to chase down, but I hope it happens because I think more cool stuff in the world is better for the world.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does seem. I wonder what the hypothesis is, because even at the time, I think at the time when Elemental was launching, Android kind of had a lot of almost like feature parity, let's call it. It's not one for one, but it was like, it's got great touchscreens, it's got really big screens, it's got kind of the same stuff that the iPhone has. So if you think about really back up time to 12, 13 years ago when iPhone was launching, even 14, I guess, the iPhone was like this really unique. There's nothing like it. It was just head and shoulders above anything else. And I feel like Android is kind of slowly, but over the years, really kept up where, like, I mean, I'm still iPhone user, but I think, it's easier to imagine that if you had to switch, you could. It's not that big a deal. And so I feel like the whole differentiation around hardware and mobile, to me, seems really, extraordinarily tough, because even these two who've been investing in it over a decade are relatively similar. Outside of the software stack is how they kind of differentiate, right? Like, are you an iMessage person? You want Google integrated services? Yeah. And stuff. So I wonder, like, is the hypothesis around a new one, and actually maybe Max can mention some of that if he's kind of has any specific thoughts on it. But I wonder if the hypothesis is around some hardware innovation, or if there's something in a software stack that they think is missing, or kind of software-based features that would actually make this better. I don't know if that any sense on what that might be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I've spent 0 time in this space, so I literally don't even really know what they're building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there new spaces that kind of have lit up that you feel like are more interesting than they're getting, or less interesting? The ones that are getting a lot of attention are actually less interesting, or the ones that are not getting enough attention are more interesting?
Yeah,
you don't want to give away your secret sauce. That's fine.
No, I just don't think about the world of, like, startup investing in that way, right? Like, I'm not a thesis-driven investor. Sure, I think about spaces from time to time, but I'm really focused on just like meeting exceptional founding teams that are going to tell me about some crazy idea and some, some way they're going to change the world and make a dent in the world. So I don't spend a lot of time like, because I don't have a lot of time,
right.
given everything that I do, coming up with like how the world should work better. Maybe one day I'll do that when I start another company or something in 10 years, or have my hand at it. But I don't think about that almost ever.
Right. When you think about kind of having started companies before, and you mentioned, if you were to do that 10 years from now, do you ever think about, is there ever an idea that you have that you feel like you really want to see in the world, but it's not going to be yours to build? How do you think about the idea of potentially kind of incubating or collaborating with somebody on something new? Is that ever part of something that tickles your interest? Or
I know this is like a really bad answer. I love my hamster wheel, and I don't want to get off my hamster wheel.
Got it. Yep.
But I've literally been on my hamster wheel for like 12 years, and I'm not getting off it anytime soon. And so the thing that I miss most about not being on that crazy hamster wheel is literally just like, I used to have a lot of ideas. Now I'm just I just don't have a lot of time to kind of to iterate and use that part of my brain. But I will tell you, I feel like I was really good at it when I used to not be a full-time investor and be on this kind of like a hamster wheel. So, it's just literally, I think I would literally have to just like disconnect for 6 months, and I think it would come back. But I don't have a good answer for you. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like,
no, I think it actually makes a lot of sense because, and I think it actually underscores an interesting point that a lot of people probably miss. So that's why I'm curious to sort of focus on it. Is in ideas themselves. I think they're oftentimes very raw and kind of thin, let's say. Yeah. But then if you pursue an idea or double down or sort of explore something further, it's almost like a muscle that you're developing that then like you develop it, and then the next day you take that idea and you actually figure out something new about it and you get deeper on it. And so the whole process of having ideas, I think, generates more ideas. The process of talking about early ideas, improves those ideas or helps you discard them to discover other new ideas. So I actually don't think it sounds as crazy at all. I think it is kind of like a muscle that you work at developing. And if you sort of don't focus on it for a while because you've got other important things to focus on, then you sort of maybe, you're not developing the muscle. And sort of, someday in the future you come back to it and you apply it. I'm sure, you can sort of grow it again. But I think there's less lightning in bottles than people imagine. I think there's more like rigor in process and pushing and discovery through that rigor and process than your like moment of inspiration and now boom, everything is different and fixed. It's really, there's more process to it than there is just kind of like the single moment.
Yeah, I mean, you just described Paul Davidson, right? Like, how long has he been at trying to build something great in social, and it took him a decade, right? And now he's landed Clubhouse, right? I mean, so yeah, case in point.
Yeah, totally. And he's spent
overnight success,
overnight thinking and work, and lots of late nights of discussion to sort of hone everything in his mind to like really, I think to get it. So I think
don't let me scare anybody. A lot of my time is spent with my family now, so it's not like I have three small kids, so it's kind of crazy. It's much crazier than it was 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said what I just said, but between like the portfolio that we built, the new activity that we're going after, plus family life got like 10x more intense. So I think there are a lot of like technology investors that have plenty of time to think about new ideas and stuff, but that's just not where I'm at in my life right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody does it a different way, and there's not one single path, because if there were one single path, it would be carving exactly the same. So I bet the time you spend with your family even helps you discover and see things through other people's eyes, and lots of ways to do it.
Vichel's WhatsApps sending me texts right now. All right, I got to jump because I got a few calls. I have a 2:00.
Yeah, fun to jam. Thanks for joining. This was a lot of fun.
For coming to lunch break.
These stories were great. We loved actually those we were talking about in the chat. These stories about the Dropbox stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's
Super
like
well
old school. But now, like, it's fun to reminisce. But like we have a lot of work to do. Let's get to work. We have another decade ahead of us, and there's going to be a ton of changes, just like we discussed. And I've got to figure it all out because it's like day one again.
Yeah.
So.
But if you want thought partners on figuring it out, come by and we'd love to jam with you.
All right, we'll talk soon. Bye.
Cool. See you. All right. That was fun.
Pretty cool, spontaneous appearance.
Yeah. How's Max doing?
Gold.
What's that?
Those stories were pretty golden.
Right. He's got a lot.
Yeah.
How are the highlights? Did you capture some good highlights?
I posted 2 of them on this like whole space entrepreneur theme.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, there are a bunch of good ones. My desktop is once again just like a minefield.
Oh, the space ones you haven't posted, right?
Oh, I did. I put them on the thread.
I see. On the same. Oh, cool. Oh, you got Boom Arrow. Nice. Oops. Here I am reading them with the highlighter account. Liking them with the highlighter account. Super awkward.
We make our own content. It's pretty magical what you guys were talking about. Just like the power of local physical community.
Yeah.
I really miss that. I mean, I don't know if I ever felt it in the same way, like professionally, but I really, I mean, we've talked about it before, but where will that be next and when, and how will it be different, and how will people find it really is like kind of a feeling like nothing else when you can spend 5 hours on a weekend just meeting people that you had no idea existed before your first like coffee date in the morning.
Right. Have you found, things from, I guess, recent things in your experience that you have had in-person or assembled communities, whether it's through Fulbright or Princeton or Princo, that carry on in some sort of like a virtual forum? Like, do most of them have an equivalent in the virtual world today, or are they more likely, similar networks but reconstituted as new kind of focuses?
Yeah, I haven't experienced much continuity from those networks, like physically to virtually. I think a lot of my interactions were pretty physical in nature. Like I'd be in New York and go to dinner with someone, and then you'd end up spending like 5 hours somewhere, and then like exactly what you were talking about. So I haven't found any of even like those root interactions really migrate online. It's more like I'm in touch with a lot of different people pretty sporadically, and I'll call someone like once every 2 months, and like I always feel in touch with people, but it's not a consistent group or like a consistent center of mass that's like spinning out and pulling other things in. It feels a lot more scattered.
Is that something you would imagine would be fun or you'd want, or is that just you've got enough other new ways to connect with people? Or
I mean, I haven't gotten like agitated about it yet or anything, or bored, because I do think that it is cool to meet someone on Twitter and then get on a phone call with them, or like these Clubhouse conversations we had about South Asian literature that went on for like 2 hours. And then yesterday I chatted with someone who came up on stage, and he was like a film producer who had all these cool ideas. So I feel like the internet definitely has those gems of people. Yeah. People are very willing to interact still, but maybe the succession of like one leads to the other in some sort of time bound period is more difficult, because it is sort of like oh, you remind me of this person, but then you have to like reach out to them and set up a call, and
Yeah.
just heavier.
It does seem heavier in some ways, but maybe it's like if I take the extreme of how kind of those types of serendipitous interactions used to work, like, I think what Ray talked about in Soma, I would say, that felt like a lot of life experience that I had in kind of the physical space here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
For many, many years. And it seems like there's some graduation from that to faster pace of meeting new people because of online. I think Twitter, was like an early version of that. And I think, things like Clubhouse are more modern ones. I think Pluto has, rekindled certain relationships that I didn't have, that I haven't kind of kept fresh on. But it almost feels like there's an increasing move toward, say, like more liquidity in those serendipitous interactions, which both remind you about people you meant to or should be or kind of wanted to keep up with because you just bump into them in a serendipitous context, but then also increases the pace of meeting new people. And so you sort of are both increasing the pace of existing relationship rekindling as well as increasing the pace of new. And it just seems like everything's faster in all directions. But maybe the thing we may lose is time. Meaning, if you got a certain amount of time, fixed number of hours in the day, rekindling more old and more serendipitous exposure to new probably just means that, like, unless you are explicit about carving out, okay, I want to spend an hour, leave 5 hours in case it turns into that. It's harder to spend that time.
Yeah, I think there's also just a lot more FOMO. I think it's a lot easier to get, and maybe this will have like mental health implications that we're not fully seeing yet, but if you're like, the only way for me to meet interesting people is to be on like Pluto or Clubhouse or Twitter or like Discord all the time, like something's happening and interesting people are there, I think it's probably much easier to get very addicted and almost like washed out and all of that right now. But I just posted this. Did you see this?
I did, yeah. I'm just popping up on the link. So, new work focus is building a town for creators, but by growing a historic town near Austin, so not from scratch. New housing, co-working cafe, boutique hotel, and more. That sounds pretty interesting. Yeah. So certainly the, I think
like physical, virtual community kind of merging and like these hacker houses and whatnot coming up.
Yeah. There's also, I think Max was mentioning cul-de-sac. So cul-de-sac certainly, is a version of this. It sounds like this one, if it's near Austin, I wonder, I don't know specifically this person, but it would not surprise me if this is, I think we talked about this before, is it Cicero Institute? CiceroInstitute.org is a thing that, here, I'll share it here. That Balaji has been talking about, which is kind of, I guess it's Joe Lonsdale is maybe one of the spearheads there. I thought that Balaji may have had, maybe he was just talking about it. Maybe it's really kind of Joe Lonsdale's thing. But I think Joe Lonsdale's moved to Austin, and this feels a little bit in the vibe of that. So I wonder if there's some overlapping networks that are sort of attaching around this.
Oh, wait, what is this? Is this like a fellowship kind of thing?
I don't know how much of it, I don't know exactly what it is today, but I think it's a bunch of writing and thinking around, if you were to start a new city from scratch, what would that look like? And it sounds like Nat Eliason is saying he's building a town for creators, not from scratch, but by growing a historic town near Austin.
Wait, Max wants to come up again.
All right. We will bring Max up. Max. Hey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Again, yeah. How are you doing? What are we talking about? The Cicero Institute?
Yeah, and to bring it back to, I think you guys are mentioning, or Ray was mentioning Zimride, which obviously is Lyft. So John Zimmer, he actually got his idea of Lyft, right? It was through a city planning class at Cornell. Talking about like city planning and yeah.
Huh. Wow. Wait, do you know more about that? What gave him that idea?
Yeah, he was in this. It was this class that was pretty famous, and they were talking about how cars were parked 96% of the time, and how people were mainly just riding solo in their cars, and that's how he founded Lyft. Basically, is from that thesis.
Wow.
From a city planning class, yeah.
I had no idea. That's really cool.
And so when you shared this link, I think, right, Max, you were mentioning about the cul-de-sac reference. So, and I think Mishti was asking if you would ever consider like living in an LA hype house.
Oh, yeah.
Are these like hacker houses coming up? What's
what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely not for me personally. But I think it's kind of cool to live with people who have the same, direct interests or trying to like work on a, the same project. I just think, it's good to have time to decompress and to kind of separate your mind from, what you're doing on a daily basis. So that would be my only reservation there.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of like what we were talking about, the food even.
A lot of those guys are and girls are getting into VC and trying to promote things on TikTok, and Charlie D'Amelio, I think, with some fintech.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wait, TikTok influencers are getting into VC?
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised both of you haven't seen this on Twitter. There's this fellow, Michael Gruen, who I think represents like Josh Richards, is like one of these TikTok guys, and Ethan Johnson, and they're trying to like get allocations to deals. And Charlie D'Amelio posted, I think, on TikTok or on Instagram about this credit card for teenagers that I guess like tracks spending and goes back to your parents. I forgot what it's called exactly.
What? Really interesting. So are they sort of like operating as, who are these people they're teaming up with? Traditional investors, or just like for themselves?
Yeah, I think like managers who are trying to be traditional investors, or maybe a mix of both. I don't really know.
Huh. Wow.
Fascinating times.
Yeah, that's really cool. I had no idea about any of that. I'm going to scour Twitter a little bit for that.
Have you guys seen the thing? Was it Sahil raised a rolling fund for Austin Allred?
Yeah.
Phenomenon?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw my comment on it earlier. I was like, that was a pretty crazy stunt.
Yeah.
Okay, is that real? I thought it was just like him trolling.
No, I think it actually happened. And I think Austin said, no, not for me. And then I think Sahil said, okay, I'm going to do it for all kinds of other potential diverse emerging managers. So if you want me to raise a rolling fund for you, I'm going to do that. So now Sahil is effectively like a fund of rolling funds.
Oh my God, he raised, there's more than $30 million of interest so far. Oh my God.
I mean, it is exactly, you would think that such a thing should exist in the ecosystem. That there's probably people who have a bunch of interesting access, maybe not as much brand as Sahil. And so if Sahil can help funnel interest into, he can create his own vetting and filtering process. And then if he can sort of help connect interest to, talent and kind of the GP side, kind of emerging GP, that kind of thing. I mean, structurally, it seems like it should exist, should be able to help. I guess you've seen some of these, like, I think like AngelList had one, and I think First Round has one, and there's a few of these like Angel Track. I think we're trying to kind of like coach or educate or network or, you know, provide community for kind of up and coming angel investors to connect with each other, learn from each other, learn from mentors.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a very structured program. But maybe if, you know, maybe what Sahil's doing is almost like a more bottoms up version of the same thing. He's like, he has good access and taste and judgment and has made plenty of good investments. And now and he has a good brand and good audience on Twitter. Now he can maybe take all of that and use it to kind of funnel into other emerging managers, so he can get like, you know, help use his platform to, you know, get capital allocated more efficiently to, you know, undiscovered talent. Almost like a YC for angels or something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, DK, can you like teach someone how to be an angel investor? I mean, like the first time, I mean, the reason I heard about Highlighter was because of the town hall with Elad Gil, and because I followed Elad for so many years, and I thought this guy was so interesting. So can you really teach that? Like,
I mean, I think there are probably some things that are, you know, sort of some patterns that are worthy of consideration at least, and that, you know, people who've seen things work and seen things not work could probably help, I think, share some of that in, you know, some sort of a discussion, mentorship type relationship. So like, I think Sahil, for example, I think has really good taste and really good personal brand. And so I would bet if you were an emerging manager and Sahil was helping you raise your funds, I think he would probably have some parts of what works for him and sort of how he judges things that would help somebody who's newer to the thing, you know, figure it out. But I mean, you know, I think the main thing is the world is always changing. So the specifics of whatever worked before are not going to be the thing that works the next time. But there's some sort of abstract philosophical framework type things that can be, you know, I think they need to be like really decoupled from the specifics to figure out what it is. But I mean, you know, like Ray was just talking about, you know, kind of the, you know, how he has really become much more biased on people instead of ideas. And I think, you know, maybe that's a general learning, but it's really hard for like, especially angel kind of super early pre-product to make strong claims about a market independent of a person addressing that market. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one that I think it would be easy for somebody who hasn't looked at a lot of these to kind of get overly excited about an idea and be like, oh, this idea is amazing. I can see where it goes. And if you're decoupled from the person who's actually doing it, I think, you know, a great market is not going to necessarily help the person get there unless the market is so strong that, like, you know, anybody could get there. So you really want to figure out, is it a market that's strong, but actually needs certain like proprietary advantages that may have been developed within a certain area. And I think like his example, we were talking about Barta Spades, right? I think the stuff that we know about, you know, Delian's background at Founders Fund and the Founders Fund network background with Elon Musk and SpaceX. And then I think one of the co-founders of Barta is ex-SpaceX. And so they'd sort of planted the seeds of all of these team that they were going to pull together when they decided to start something. And I think having some sort of proprietary advantage like that is important. It's much more important than, you know, to kickstart the success of something. It's much more important than just saying like, hey, like space is a big idea. Let's do something in space, right?
Yeah, I think that's the distinction, because when I think about like incubating, I guess like with a team, as you just mentioned, with, you know, the SpaceX connections at Founders Fund, is the same thing with Snowflake, right? With Sutter Hill is like how they were able to put that all together with Mike Spicer. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's the most fascinating thing to me about like EIRs and people in those roles, how they're able to, you know, work together with the firm and use the network to, you know, drive their company really.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like that, you know, there's a dangerous, you know, assumption that you might be able to, like, you know, sitting in venture, you can just like, you know, instigate companies. But I think there's also maybe too much bias against the possibility that those can work out. And I think, Mike Spicer is, a great example of, I think he certainly did it with Snowflake as an instigator, but I think he did it with maybe one or two others over the course of time. And I think, he may be uniquely good at that, or unique among handfuls of people who are good at that versus a general pattern that like investors, have the right, mind space, time, whatever it is to be successful at that. But I think he's sort of purposefully done that kind of thing. Certainly like Keith in Open Door is another example where he was highly impactful in kind of helping instigate that idea. He wasn't like just an investor, but he's actually a co-founder of the company and was like, heavily involved in the instigation of that. So I think, there's examples where it works, but there's, typically just kind of like spitballing on ideas is not really enough. And I think I think people are right to be cautious about trying to incept ideas along with capital and get something to happen. I think it needs to be like, if it can work, I think it's because it's much more hands-on. It's like, okay, here's a space, here's the first 10 customers. I've already done the customer interviews and I know that this thing is, there's a lot of demand for this thing, if only it can be built. And now let's pull together some capital and team and get enough of the pieces together that we can actually like give it a go. But at least these 10 customers are all saying the same thing and willing to spend money if such a thing exists. That's more like, there's real work to assembling that customer list, that team, that capital, bring it all together. That's a great starting point. But that's rare that somebody does that much work versus, hey, what if there were like a tennis app? Because I like to play tennis and here's $1 million, go for it. It's kind of
yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, those types of examples have been the most fascinating to me over the last couple months that I've tried to, dig into. As you said, Keith at Open Door and, Mike Spicer at Sutter Hill, just getting those, teams together and making it happen.
Yeah, that might be an interesting, has anybody written that might be an interesting topic to write about, like pick, I don't have them all top of mind. Certainly this discussion, there's Mike and Keith. Oh, actually, Hemant from General Catalyst is another one who's been really successful with this model.
Incubators.
What? Who is that? Sorry.
Hemant Taneja from General Catalyst has helped start Livongo and I think one other one, if I recall. One other one that's pretty far along on their way to success.
I'll take a look at that. Definitely. Yeah. I just did this like writing on Mike Spicer that I pulled from Rome actually.
Oh, cool. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there'd be a really interesting piece of writing that kind of, showcases each of, there's probably a handful of people who've had really outsized success with it. And, probably a very steep drop off from there. And so I wonder if there'd be an interesting piece to sort of try to analyze the commonalities among the people who have had, really outsized success with it. And because there's a small handful.
What do you mean by it? Like process of incubation or?
Yeah, the process of like a venture capitalist, like a professional venture capitalist actually successfully incubating a very large scale outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's like very small handful of those types of things, but it would be interesting if there are, enough for any commonalities among who they are, what their background was, what their process was, how the, idea came to be, how the first customers came to be, how the team came to be. Is there anything to learn across, if you took the 5 or 6 that have been, uber successful in that model, are there any commonalities, or is each one a special, pardon the phrase, snowflake?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to do that research, honestly. I don't know how I'd start, but yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, write something up and tweet at the people and ask them questions.
Yeah, literally. I'm sure you could find some like early stories and interviews and stuff, and then just go from there.
Yeah, I'll take a look this weekend.
Kevin Kwok wrote on Kwok Chain about the Mike Spicer incubation playbook.
Yeah, that's what I just posted in the chat, and that was a great read.
Yeah, I feel like I did. Yep. Yeah, this was great. This is super deep. Super deep. Everything that Kevin writes is just gold. His stuff is so good.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I wonder if you took sort of this model and you could do a similar piece with Hemant and a similar piece with Keith and kind of try to figure out the commonalities, if any, exist. I'd be curious to read a deep dive on the commonalities.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, you were saying?
I forgot now. Oh yeah, how have you guys been managing all the Substacks that you may be subscribed to? Like, do you have a process for that, or how you think about reading each one?
I started filtering them into a separate label, and as a result, I don't read any of them anymore, which is not the ideal outcome. But did you hear they're making like a Substack reader and doing all these different things to help people manage these similar issues?
Yeah, so I've used that a couple times now. It's pretty good. Just have everything in one spot, but I feel like there needs to be a better way to just categorize them all. You know, maybe you have a tech genre, small genre, whatever it is.
I thought they added some basic tagging. If you go, they have like broad categories, but whereas before it was just this leaderboard, I think.
So is it structured like an email reader or more like an RSS reader?
I think it's more of like an RSS reader, actually. I don't really think that it's maybe it's like email, I don't know.
So that'd be pretty interesting if they could help solve the problem of like managing your Substacks in a way to understand like what's read and unread state, and maybe even get into helping nurture, sort of more more audiences across newsletters. I think if they had a reader around that would strengthen that position for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Make it really mobile friendly, because there are times that I, want to read Substacks on the go or whatever.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting space. I mean, anything in kind of like how does written media get managed and consumed is it's just big. It's the internet. It's like a little petri dish of the internet.
Yeah, what the New York Times, has been doing, I think, with digital media, they've really stepped up their game. I think I read in some forum, some medium, that New York Times really put a large emphasis on driving traffic to the website and getting, subs there rather than, print.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worked out, right? It's considered a success story.
Yes. And especially with the daily podcast in the morning, I think that's also been a big transition and a lot.
I love the daily. I love kind of everything about that, both the frequency as well as the style of like what topics they address. And then I think Barbaro is like just world class as a, journalist and interviewer. He has such great ways to probe without putting people on the defense, but really being able to get into like the nitty gritty of what he's trying to understand.
Yeah, I'm not a listener myself, but the one or two times that I've tuned in, it's been pretty good.
We saw the Daily live on stage in San Francisco.
Really? Wait, what was that like?
So they did, I think it was Commonwealth Club of San Francisco. They, they were like, have tickets and you show up at, the Norse Pavilion, I think it was, in kind of near City Hall. And you just show up and you sit in an audience in the theater, and they come out on stage and they played like the theme song. But it was really more of a talk about the process of how they go about creating the Daily.
Yeah.
What's the, the timing, like some of the stuff that I thought, sticks with me that I thought was interesting is the, they're mostly working kind of like the noon to midnight time frame, to try to make the thing that they're producing kind of well researched and complete
for the next
relevant for the next day. And I think I actually end up getting it, thanks to my insomnia, I think around 3 or 4 o'clock a.m. it downloads. So I think that's around when it publishes. But it's almost like the first example of like a produced but fairly real time, news oriented, piece of content in the podcast ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like super interesting how that works and how they create it and how they even schedule content. Because I think they mentioned they have a little bit of a stable of things and like a content calendar of what's coming when. And if they have, okay, we've got this piece that's not particularly timely, it's like timely to the week, but it's not timely to the day, and then some big news hits and they need to address it, then they actually stay up and rework the whole thing and make the content more about the very recent thing that happened. So they kind of have a little bit of a stable of stuff that they plan to do, but then they're always sort of willing to interrupt their, scheduled program in case they have something kind of more breaking that they want to share.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
The number of takes he did on, he's got his famous like tagline at the beginning.
What does he start with?
Let me find a YouTube video of it.
I haven't listened to it in so long.
Let me look for Michael Barbaro intro. All right, I'm getting the moment in video. Oh my God. I don't know if I don't have the moment, but let me just share. I don't know, if you're not big daily nerds, you might not enjoy this as much as me, but it's kind of just funny to see him.
Loyalty. Trump turns to Comey and says,
Wait, it opened it like
Trump turns to Comey and says, do I have your loyalty?
Mm-hmm.
And Comey says, you have my honesty.
oh yeah, that's right.
Okay. The Daily was awarded a DuPont Columbia Award in
That like beginning.
That like the cold open and then the music starts and then I think it's like, this is the Daily or something.
Oh yeah.
There's some rhythmic way that he says it that's very like signature and characteristic.
Yeah.
And they showed a bunch of the outtakes of him doing that.
Oh wow.
Oh, when he was in San Francisco, or when they were
when we were he was on stage, and then I think they were playing it over, pre-recorded over, and they were kind of commenting and talking about the process of recording and producing that content. Like that intro with his tagline, the cold open, the intro music, and then his kind of, this is the Daily, or however he does it. I'm not going to do a Michael Barbaro impression without practicing a lot more. But I will try if I practice.
Mishti, I think I might have told you this, but I had a radio show for 4 years, and we really tried to get the jingle down perfectly, because it's just a nice like hook at the beginning. I love jingles to radio shows or just to TV shows in general.
Yeah. What was yours? You should send it to us.
Yeah, I have to unearth a file, but I will. It's really upbeat and fun, and
That's awesome. Did you have a favorite episode you worked on or show?
Yeah,
music, or was it also like interviews and stuff?
Yeah, so we did. We talked about sports, and I think it's sad to say, but my favorite episode probably was when Kobe Bryant died, one of my co-hosts was from the same high school that Kobe went to, Lower Merion, and he spoke about Kobe at length, and it was really, really heartfelt, I would say.
Yeah. That's really cool. You should keep it going. You should start like an audio Substack or something.
Yeah, I'd love to get back into the podcasting game or the radio show arena, but don't really know what I want to talk about because I think I've moved on past the all sports narrative now.
Yeah.
I was filing a bug. All right. I think I do need to stand and
Take a break from
2 hour lunch. I need to actually have my real lunch now.
Max, I'm glad you popped by.
Thanks so much. This was fun.
Yeah.
Well, we do it every weekday at noon, so come by whenever.
Yeah, this was definitely an anomaly, but thanks so much, guys, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good one, Max.